Is this crazy? We stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in the history of Make America Great Again. How can you be against it?
We are T-minus 11 hours from what President Trump is calling Liberation Day, the day that America will be liberated from, James?
Prosperity, free enterprise.
Liberated
Liberated from the post-war era of the American-led rules-based order.
Liberation Day to be liberated from, Jeff?
I'm just excited for the grilling. And
the grilling?
Yeah. I think it's going to be a new tradition. This will probably be the last Liberation Day we're all working, actually, because as we reported this weekend, some Trump officials want to push to make this a federal holiday going forward.
You're not joking.
I'm not joking. Well, sort of.
Is it true that they did it on April 2nd instead of April 1st so that it didn't seem like April Fool's Day?
That has been the direct public statement by the President of the United States on a matter of important public policy, that you don't want to do something this significant and assume that the world might not believe you, which could still happen, actually.
Rhonda, any other things we're being liberated from?
I like what Jeff just said. I'm still taking that in. A national holiday. And yeah, it appears that, members of his own party may not want to sign up for this. So yeah, this is, I might have sobered the mood there a little bit. But,
no, I'm excited. I feel like every year families can gather around and read the tariff code together and look at import prices and manufacturing capacity. And that can be sort of our new great American holiday.
And someday someone will say, Grandpa Jeff, where were you on Liberation Day? What were you doing?
I'll say, I first scooped that this was even possible. And they'll say, we don't care.
Here in the Washington Post newsroom, we'll call it Jeff Day. Yeah. But as you can tell, this is Sidebar from the Washington Post, and the gang is here. James Hohmann, Rhonda Colvin, and our special guest, White House economics reporter Jeff Stein, the scoopy Jeff Stein, who we will name a day after here at the Washington Post, April 2nd, forevermore. So this big tariff day we've been talking about is nearly upon us, or is it? Because in the last few weeks, President Trump has sort of pulled back from the tariff threats, like Lucy pulling the football away from Charlie Brown, leaving the world sort of flummoxed and trying to figure out what's next. So we're going to talk to Jeff and also James and Rhonda about why Trump is doing this. What's the theory of the case? Who will actually pay for any price hikes? What are economists saying about the repercussions of this and how it will affect Americans' wallets? Let's just dive right in. Jeff, how massive is this? Like, give us a sense of scale based on what other presidents have done and what Donald Trump is talking about doing.
So it is really hard, and it has been really hard, even for people who are paid full time to keep track of this. So I can't even imagine how people who are tracking everything else, much less people who are not even professional reporters, are supposed to be on top of this. There have been more than 100 tariff-related announcements already. So most of those are to change or reverse or scrap something that he already implemented. But to give you the broad picture here, during his entire first term, there was a lot of headlines about Trump's trade war. Cumulatively, that whole thing was about, give or take, $400 billion of goods. So not nothing, but $400 billion.
Over 4 years.
Over 4 years. Trump has already imposed and then largely rescinded about 800 to maybe $1 trillion. So already in the first few weeks, we have seen more than twice the trade war impact of the entirety of Trump's first term. And Liberation Day, April 2nd, that the White House has been billing and gearing up for so long, could be, and again, we can talk about the nuances here, but could be twice that. So they have talked about hitting about 90% of trade with the U.S. So if the first term was $400 billion in total, we could be talking about close to $3 or $4 trillion on Wednesday. So we don't know exactly what the rate for that will be, but it gives you a sense, I think, that the Trump first-term trade war was unlike anything we'd seen in decades, really since Nixon, and even predating that because of the complexity and variety of what Trump pursued in his first term. This second Trump term is already maybe by the end of this week, going to hit 10 times the entirety of the trade war tension of his whole first term. So this is just, it's a different category of thing.
When you talk about it in terms of dollars, just explain what you mean. Do you mean money that would normally be made, that is being made, that is essentially like a tax? What do you mean by that amount?
That refers to the value of the goods being imported to the U.S. So we import, the numbers fluctuate, but somewhere close to $4 trillion a year from other countries. And here I'm talking about goods primarily. So food and cheap consumer electronics and lumber and parts for manufacturing and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Huge list of stuff. That stuff is cumulatively worth close to $4 trillion. And again, we can get into sort of the nuances of the separate plans that they've been discussing, but it's fair to say that the plans they've outlined so far could touch more than $3 trillion of that trade by increasing the duties on them coming in, which is the tariff.
Do you have to take brain breaks sometimes, Jeff, just to keep all of this straight? Because the other thing is that this is a moving target, right? We don't actually know what's being implemented tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so we can get into that if you're.
Let's pause on that. Let's pause because I want to get some perspective from James and Rhonda. James on like what this is going to mean for American consumers, and then Rhonda on the politics of this. Let's start what it means for wallets.
Well, I mean, already people's 401ks are feeling it. We talk about these numbers, but the equity markets are worth $3 trillion less than when Trump started talking about this. Donald Trump says, this is going to raise $100 billion in revenue. The RNC tweeted that, but that's $100 billion essentially that should be viewed as a tax increase. It's $100 billion.
That money comes from somewhere, right?
Someone's paying it. Mm-hmm. And, this is just, it really is a headache and a mess. And there's this game of hokey pokey, the more than 100 announcements. There's actually a really cool tracker that the Washington Post has made of all these different announcements that Jeff is talking about. And it is disorienting. Trump is like an arsonist who keeps starting fires and then putting them out. And there remains to be seen what's going to happen. And unlike the first term, Trump has not been as responsive to market signals. So the market's tanking isn't scaring him off, maybe because he's not running for re-election again, maybe because this time he's not surrounded by people like Gary Cohn, who had been the president of Goldman Sachs and was there in the first term. Now, it's people like Peter Navarro, who has really built his whole identity around this project of erecting trade barriers.
We have to be careful about what words we use when we talk about the market. Like, it has not crashed. It has not bottomed out. I mean, we are still in an an era of prosperity year over year, but
it's in correction territory. Okay. So it's gone down more than 10%, and it kind of came back and then went back into correction territory. I mean, you're right. Perspective is important, but losing 10% of something is technically the definition of being decimated. And that's what has happened.
Jeff.
It's not really the vibe of Liberation Day for you to call it a tax, though.
Right.
You're not really in the spirit of the holiday.
I know. This is like the Jewish friend over at Christmas.
Just because every single economist calls it that doesn't mean that.
Well, before we talk politics, Rhonda, Jeff, what is the sort of the economist take on this? What are a lot of economists saying?
I think mainstream economists, by and large, think that this is a really unforced error and mistake. Trump talks about this as necessary to bring back jobs and production to the U.S., but there has been a lot of research suggesting that Trump's first term tariffs exacerbated or caused a manufacturing recession because the U.S. manufacturing output right now is not really based on the low-end products, some of which Trump is trying to onshore. It's about, high tech, the sort of the end of the value chain for high-end manufacturing goods. And those manufacturers depend on cheap inputs for steel, aluminum, and other things that we don't produce here because they are somewhat simple and easier to produce. Now, I don't know if you guys saw this, but I did think it was very interesting that the United Auto Workers has come out and endorsed Trump's auto tariffs. And, there is some reason to believe that if you wall off competition for certain sectors, those sectors will be able to expand because they have more of a hold on domestic markets. That's what the supporters of this have been arguing, and there's nothing to that. But we're in an incredibly complicated global economy, and for American manufacturing to grow, a lot of people would say that we need to focus on the high-end production, the complex stuff, the stuff that will sort of define the 21st century. And that stuff gets harder if we are at a disadvantage relative to our competitors in Germany and in Europe and in China increasingly, because the inputs to make those products are more expensive.
Yeah, and it's also important to point out that we're hearing from so many manufacturers who are like, you don't understand. Like, I make a widget, I send it to Canada, they do something to it, they send it back to me, I send it to Mexico. Like, North America is really intertwined cross borders in a way that is going to get more complicated, even for things that are quote unquote made in America. Rhonda, let's talk politics. We have wondered when and if Congress would push back against President Trump and some of his policy decisions. What are we hearing on Capitol Hill about these tariffs?
Well, I think what you're hearing about this round or the prospect of Liberation Day from Republicans is that they want to first see what the plan is before they start saying how they'll push back. I think we can take signals of what they've said before about how this will really affect the farming communities, states that rely heavily on agriculture. You all remember that Chuck Grassley, one of the oldest senators and one who's the head of a committee, he said this is going to affect Iowa farmers where he's from, and he wanted an exemption for that. So that was back in the winter when I think that was the first round of threats from Trump to do tariffs with Canada. We also heard from the House Agriculture Committee chair, a Republican who said he's nervous that this will harm farmers and that that Congress may have to do a bailout, much like they did back in 2019.
$30 billion.
Right. They had to bail out farmers because they were feeling the impact of the trade war with China back then. So if you have the Republican chair of the Agriculture Committee already saying that this week, that they're already looking at a bailout if they need it, that tells you where Republicans are taking this very seriously. I think we are about to see the appetite for this tariff and trade war and Liberation Day soon, when there is a vote that is planned in the Senate, although Cory Booker, I believe, is still on the Senate floor. So this vote may be pushed back, but it's led by Tim Kaine, Senator Klobuchar, Senator Warner, and also Rand Paul, which also shows you that this situation is making, strange bedfellows.
3 Democrats, 1 Republican.
Right. Who have joined together, and they're going to force a vote on stopping the Canadian tariffs. So that will at least give us a sense of how many Republicans will join that effort. Susan Collins has said she is going to. So we'll see.
Sorry,
we'll see.
I've always laughed because I feel like the quote from her, she's always like considering it or troubled, but has she actually signed on?
She has signed on. So we will likely see more Republicans join this vote than you might typically see on other issues. So it's showing that they're being brought together over something that they're hearing from constituents on.
James, talk to us more about carve-outs and what industries are trying to sort of get a word to the White House.
Every industry. I had lunch yesterday with a top Republican lobbyist who described what's happening as a gold rush. He said he's making millions of dollars off of this and really enjoying it because.
So industries are coming to him and saying, we need you to lobby on our behalf. Go to the White House, go to Congress, and get a carve-out for us.
Yeah, and so every company, every industry, every trade association is coming in and saying, help, we're going to be totally screwed. We need some relief. And what do we have to do? And so then these lobbyists will go to administration, people who are their friends or used to work for them or whatever, and say, hey, this company has a plan to reduce its dependency on China, and it's going to move some factory or some means of production from China to an allied country in Asia or eventually to the United States, or they're going to make this investment in a swing state or whatever. And so basically every company is being told you have to have some sort of plan. And also the companies where people have given big money to Trump or the Trump super PAC are able to more easily get an audience. And I'm hearing stories of companies and trade associations where none of their executives gave to Trump or Trump's super PAC, and they're paying a real price for that. And so now they're having to give even more money to basically try to buy access. And I mean, it's pretty wild what's happening. And essentially all these companies are trying to weigh how to deal with it. There's obviously a strong temptation to fight it, to push back. But what the lobbyists are telling these companies is Apple, one of the biggest companies in the world, has essentially caved and has said they're going to move production away from China. And if Tim Cook and Apple don't think that they can stand up to Trump and beat Trump, your $400 billion company certainly isn't going to be able to. So it's a really wild moment where government is essentially picking winners and losers, and companies are terrified. And there are a lot of people in Washington who are making a lot of money off of the uncertainty and fear that Trump is creating.
So we could call it lobbying day.
Right, maybe.
April
Have you reported that? God, what a great story. We are less than 24 hours out, and they have not given us the very, very basics of what on earth they are doing with the global economy and the stock market and the fate of millions of jobs in less than 24 hours.
We're taping this around 1 o'clock on Tuesday. I mean, what you said is really stunning. Do we know if they know what they're doing?
I mean, my reporting and the reporting of the Wall Street Journal and CNBC has been that there is an active debate at this moment. Trump said yesterday that he had made a decision a long time ago. I don't remember the precise phrase. Doesn't seem right based on all the sourcing I have.
I mean, just normal White House operating procedure is you're working on briefing papers and documents and trying to, you're spell checking stuff, you're organizing things, you're running it by your advisors, you're getting counsel on any loopholes or any problems. It's an exhaustive and intensive process to prepare for something like this. And this is a self-imposed deadline that they've created of April 2nd.
And to your point, Libby, I mean, one of the problems with the reciprocal tariff idea that they pursued is that it's actually logistically quite complicated to have different rates for different countries and potentially different industries, right? And all of that work is actually mechanically hard for the Commerce Department and USTR to carry out in practice. There's lots of goods, they come from all over. How do you assess, the exact provenance of where it comes from, who made it? Those are really, really complicated questions for people in our nation's customs facilities to actually deal with. And those realities, those prosaic realities, are just so disconnected from Trump saying this number, that number. How about that? This constant whirligig of activity.
Rhonda, tariffs are something that Donald Trump has been interested in for decades. We had our colleague J.M. Rieger talking with us last week on Sidebar about how this love or obsession goes back to the 1980s when he was a businessman in Manhattan. He also, though, is now running as a candidate on this platform of economic populism. And what are the politics? What are the politics from his perspective of what he's doing?
Well, I think this fits his the persona of being a strong man, a strong negotiator, being tough. And I think that's one of the reasons we haven't seen a plan is because he's keeping people in suspense. It's a negotiating tactic. It has been in the past where they get up to the line and then he declares whether they'll do a delay or pause. But it appears to be Donald Trump, the businessman, bringing that to the presidency. When we look at the politics of it, that's one thing I'm really interested in seeing how it plays at the ground level. Because when you go back to the trade war back in his first term, you saw that a lot of the states that felt the impact were the states that voted for him. You saw a lot of Midwestern states that have a lot of farming economy, that they were directly impacted. So this one even seems a little different because it's so widespread. It is going to affect, textiles, which means, clothing. It's going to affect if you can buy a car or not, the car parts you might need to fix your existing car. I mean, food prices. It just feels so big that a lot of people will be affected by this, whether they voted for him or did not. So I think the politics we'll have to see where that goes. And if there is going to be some sort of groundswell of angry Americans upset that, prices are going way up and the market seems to be, volatile. But, I think it's more of a wait and see to see how this feels to Americans to decide the politics. But if you're already seeing Republicans on the Hill say, okay, we need to pump the brakes on this, I think that does tell us that I don't know if this is advantageous for Trump.
And that gets us into this question of pain and who will feel the pain and how much of a threshold Americans have for that pain. Now, Trump has said a few times now that there will be like some, a little bit of a temporary pain point here. Let's listen to President Trump talking about this. It's a little noisy because he's like on the tarmac, but you get a sense of how he's preparing Americans for what's coming.
We may have short-term a little pain, and people understand that. But long-term, the United States has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world.
That's President Trump talking about what's to come, Jeff. How much is the White House sort of talking about this period of pain and how long it could last?
Their spin on this is that for all the pain from the tariffs right now, if we can just sort of get past the next few months, the tax bill and the bank deregulation and the sort of broader deregulatory approach that they have will unlock enough private sector investment and mobility to save us from the pain of the tariffs. Like, that's what you hear from people in the administration who understand, which not all of them, some people in the administration are genuinely convinced that the tariffs are a win-win for the U.S. economy. Like, there is no trade-off here. They say maybe the stock market will go down a little bit, but then we'll unlock our glorious future. But for the others, it's sort of like, we just have this little difficult period to get through. It's still early on. There's still time before the midterms. You kick in those tax cuts and other stuff that they're going to do to sort of incentivize private sector growth, and then that should cover up the damage from the tariffs. That said, I mean, the notes from analysts, I think, continue to discount the odds that Trump is not bluffing and using this as a negotiation tactic. I think there has been over and over again, Wall Street and the business community is not listening to what Trump is saying. They're hearing what they want Trump to be saying, which are two very different things. I've talked to people who have spoken directly to the president. He is not, I mean, it's conceivable that the president is, even in his private life, telling people things to increase his bargaining leverage over foreign allies by increasing the credibility of his threat. I find that quite unlikely, though. And he is saying privately to people that he thinks the tariffs are really, really good for the American economy. And he views them as, along with immigration, the two pillars of his entire political persona going back to 2016. So this is not, I think Wall Street is, I mean, I could look stupid for saying this, but I think Wall Street continues to underestimate the seriousness of his intent here.
Trump told NBC this weekend that he, quote, couldn't care less if prices on foreign cars go up, because then he thinks, James, that would force Americans to buy American cars or incentivize them to buy American cars. What's your take on this pain point?
Well, this gets to what Jeff was saying earlier about how the head of the United Auto Workers endorsed the tariffs because they sort of see some advantage for American cars, American workers. The Journal reported last week that Trump met with the CEOs of the big three automakers and told them not to raise prices. I mean, historically, the point of tariffs, in part, is to allow the domestic manufacturers to charge more. If you're keeping foreign competitors out, then GM can charge more for a Chevy. We'll see what happens. And as you were noting a little bit ago, these supply chains are so complicated, and I think Trump is discounting that piece of it as well. A lot of the things, I think I completely agree with Jeff that Wall Street is undercounting. There's still sort of this, Trump is going to unleash these animal spirits. I don't think anyone is not making investments right now because of the tax rate. They're holding off on making investments because of the uncertainty of what Trump is going to do. And we've seen consumer sentiment and business sentiment take a big hit, where people are kind of holding on to money to see how this all shakes out. And these things end up becoming like a self-fulfilling prophecy, where people are nervous that the economy is going to go into a recession, so then they don't spend. And, so I think that Trump's not thinking through the second, third, fourth, fifth order effects of what he's about to do.
And what's fascinating is President Trump, as you pointed out, Rhonda, likes to wait till the last minute as a negotiating tactic. Donald Trump, the businessman as well, he also likes it as a showman. So it's like these instincts that he has to pause and wait and make everybody pay attention, everybody focus on him, could ultimately be hurting what he's doing. I have to move on to someone else who has everyone's attention right now on Capitol Hill, and that is Senator Cory Booker, because he has been doing what's like a filibuster, but not technically a filibuster. He's been talking on the Senate floor for many, many hours. So we'll come back to Trump's tariffs, I'm sure, many times in future weeks. But let's pivot to what Senator Booker's doing. Democrat of New Jersey. Rhonda, when did he take to the floor and what is he trying to accomplish?
So he took to the floor on Monday night. Yes, we're at Tuesday. So he right now, as we were recording, I think he has been holding the Senate floor for about 16 hours. So to give people a frame of context there, the longest filibuster in history, that belongs to Strom Thurmond, who was filibustering the passage of the Civil Rights Act. He kept the floor for a little over 24 hours. Senator Cruz of Texas, a current member, he filibustered for over 20 hours. So right now, Booker he might hit a record. We don't know yet, but he isn't filibustering a bill. He is basically holding the floor to bring attention to some of the concerns he said constituents have been sending letters about over Elon Musk, over Trump, over a variety of policy issues with the Trump administration. It's been organized. If you've been watching it, it's been organized where he's talking about immigration. He's talking about Social Security and DOJ's impact on that. He was talking about Greenland, the threats of taking over Greenland when I was listening to him a few hours ago. He's also employing an interesting tactic to help him out a little bit, where Democrats are coming to the floor now that they're up and moving on the Hill. Right. They're coming to the floor to ask him very long-winded questions to give him a speaking break. There's a debate, if you go back into the history of filibusters, there's a debate over whether a senator can use the bathroom.
You knew I was going to ask.
Right, I knew it was coming. The parliamentarian's office will tell you that, no, they have to hold the floor. If they've started this, they have to continue speaking.
They have to stay on the floor.
Not just hold the floor, but hold it in, yeah.
There you go, James. But that's what we're seeing right now. If you look at some of the chats online with the live streams, there's a clip right now of him, and I think this is what's happening right now.
So if for our YouTube audience, you can see Senator Booker. This is live.
He still seems very animated. I have noticed times where he seems a bit exhausted, but he seems like he is talking to a crowd or another senator at this point. But if you've been looking on the live streams of this, people are really interested, and you're seeing people, root for him and say, keep going. This may work for him politically. He does know how to use cameras, social media to his advantage. And he said he's trying to get in good trouble, which is a line invoking the late Representative John Lewis.
He can only drink water and milk?
Water and milk. That's
what's allowed on the House floor? The Senate floor?
Right, on the Senate floor. Water, I think, was always allowed, but milk was added in the 60s when a senator was filibustering and he asked the parliamentarian, can I at least have some milk? Parliamentarian said, there's not a problem with that. So that's been the lasting rule on this, that you can have milk or water.
So just like on our live shows, can Cory Booker have like some almonds in his pocket to try to...
No, just the milk and the water. And if you've been watching this or just saw the clip we played, he has water in front of him, 2 glasses. It doesn't look like he's drinking a lot of it.
No, because then he'd have to leave. Rhonda Colvin, James Hohmann, Jeff Stein, thank you so much to all three of you for being here. Jeff, we really appreciate you taking the time and look forward to seeing what actually happens tomorrow and reading your reporting to find out the details of what the Trump tariffs really look like. I'm Libby Casey. Thank you so much for watching Sidebar and listening to us. We'll see you on Thursday.